Well, welcome to episode 46 of 10 Minute Record Reviews. And today I'm going to talk about The Clash's debut album, which came out in 1977. This is a UK pressing, not a first pressing, I wish. So of course it's a punk album, but like all Clash albums, it's punk with a lot of variety. And it's kind of funny, you find yourself, over time I find myself thinking about The Clash's early years, and punk came to mean certain things. A lot of three-chord riffing, lack of guitar solos, certain kinds of attitudes and behavior and so on. And The Clash, from day one, never really fit that mold. They have songs for sure that fit that mold, and they have attitudes and whatever that kind of fit the mold, but they're also regularly breaking all of what we came to understand as the rules of punk, very early on. And so the question is, when you listen to this, is it actually sensible to talk about breaking punk rules when you were actually inventing punk in the first place, and probably doing a better job of inventing punk than some people who were at the time, arguably more famous. These guys are serious musicians. They're politically astute, even in their early days, and that is typically what marks them out. Terry Chimes is still the drummer for most of the album. Topper Headon is playing on this album, but he only plays on 4 tracks. He plays on Janie Jones, White Riot, What's My Name, and London's Burning. It has one cover, pretty much it's all originals, although Mick Jones brought a bunch of songs from his prior band, the prior incarnations of the band, into this, which he had written. But typically all the songs are credited to Strummer and Jones. And in truth, even the songs that Jones brought were often reworked, certainly lyrically, by Strummer, often to take them in a more political and a less kind of personal, relationship-y kind of direction. The best example of that is I'm So Bored of the USA, which Jones had brought to the recording sessions as I'm So Bored with You. There is one cover which, it's not oddly, but because we know that the Clash were hugely influenced by reggae, but still it stands out. Their one cover is a 6-minute long reggae track, which is a testament to their willingness just to do different shit from the beginning, and to draw on their pretty not just reggae, but also early rock and roll is a big influence. You really see that later on in London Calling, and actually, frankly, on pretty much every record they've done. This album isn't as well known as is its contemporary, Nevermind the Bollocks. The Pistols had the outrage part down, and they had the PR people down, but they didn't really have the kind of ethos of punk, I would argue, as nailed as the Clash did. When you go back and listen to it and you compare this to Nevermind the Bollocks, the message that's here and the ethos that's here is so much clearer than on that album, which is as much about, where Nevermind the Bollocks is as much about poking a finger in the eye of folks as it is actually about saying anything. And a lot of the things were actually said on Nevermind the Bollocks are a little iffy in retrospect, right? So there you go. For the people that heard it in real time in the day, it's clear that this was, and was for a lot of people in North America as well, but certainly in the UK, a life-changing record, a record which completely charted a new and different path for people to take musically. It's one of the few albums that has a legitimate claim to not only being one of the best rock and roll albums of the whole 70s, but also one of the most influential. Probably there are 6 or 7 records that could compete with that. Thematically, this album is largely about life in Britain in the mid-1970s to late 1970s, how shitty it was, how the establishment could basically be relied upon to keep people down, offer them nothing in the way of life prospects except shitty dead-end jobs if they could get that. And these themes repeat again and again throughout the album. Janie Jones, which is an absolute punk classic, one of the first songs they ever wrote. You kind of tell that because Simenon is playing a lot of one-note bass lines, and I think there's probably no more compelling reason for that than he was just learning how to play bass at the time. Remote Control is all about hanging around, getting sort of pushed around by the cops, basically being treated like dirt. Businesses don't like you, you're down and out, you don't count. I'm So Bored with the USA. This is a song which it's originally written as basically a sort of a fuck you breakup song by Mick Jones. It's all about his former girlfriend. I'm so bored with you. And story goes that Joe Strummer actually misheard that and started to create a bunch of other lyrics and riff on that particular theme. And by the time Jones had a chance to say, actually, that's not what it's about, that's what the song had become. Hate and War, What's My Name, London's Burning, these are, again, all, other songs on side one are all very much this kind of theme of basically being young and alienated in London and being working class and not really having much in the way of life prospects. White Riot is a song which, is often misinterpreted just because of its title, which sounds, a little bit skinheady and iffy. And in fact, occasionally has been co-opted by Skins and others, who aren't really that interested in the actual context of the song. The song itself, and it's pretty clear when you actually, when you actually listen to the lyrics carefully, is about, white guys basically looking at black people protesting against the establishment and the system and remarking on how brave they are and actually taking the system on, whereas the white working class just meekly accept their shitty lot in life and do nothing about it. And so it's time to take a lesson from black people and actually stand up and fight the system too. That interpretation gets lost a little bit sometimes, but that's clearly the case. I just want to riff a little bit on What's My Name. I think this song is one of the greatest punk moments in the history of punk rock. Not necessarily the whole song, but the chorus, for me, I cannot think of a few seconds of punk rock that makes you want to jump into a crowd of other sweaty people with total abandon more than the chorus of this song. And the What's My Name, that bit, I think it's amazing. Side two, we're back to the alienation theme, so career opportunities, basically, the system gives you none. Cheat, which is kind of an ode to the idea that you get nowhere by playing by the rules. Protex Blues, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek song about condoms, fair enough, these guys are young. Police and Thieves, if you consider this a punk song, it's a 6-minute punk song, which probably marks it out, it puts it in probably the 99.9th percentile of punk songs in terms of length. Of course, it's not a punk song, it's a reggae song, delivered with a bit of a punk style. I feel, frankly, they did better covers of reggae songs and they actually did a better job of introducing reggae influences than on this one. Kind of drags on a little bit. I feel it's kind of one of the weaker tracks in the album. But there's 48 Hours, with its great reference to Monday coming like a jail on wheels. Again, sort of dead-end life in the UK. And then finally Garageland, which or Garageland, I guess, if you're going to use the English pronunciation, which has a pretty funny origin because it's written as a riposte to a critic from the New Musical Express, a guy called Shara Murray, who was one of these rock critics who had turned himself into a bit of an institution and therefore was a kingmaker and had therefore gotten himself into a position where he could be pretty dismissive at times. Writes this review where he hears an early Clash gig and he says these guys are garage band, just basically go back to the garage that they were conceived in. 2 years later, this guy would go on to say they were the greatest band in the world. So, ultimately he came around, but this is their little pound of flesh on that. And it's also about, the whole world of punk, even in 1977, starting to get corrupted by money and fame and going a bit corporate, and no doubt probably a slight dig at their contemporaries, the Pistols and others at the time. So the verdict, you have to give this album 5 out of 5, I think. It's an incredible record. It's a landmark in punk rock and a foundational piece of punk rock. As I mentioned, it's also an album which is both an incredible rock and roll album, but also incredibly influential. And they would get more sophisticated, both lyrically and musically, but they'd never get more punk, and arguably they would never actually get any better than they were in this album.